That day, the lawyer's office smelled of leather chairs and dust, a place where futures were supposed to be written in black ink on thick paper. I sat there with my hands clenched so tight my knuckles went white because I already knew how this would go. My family had always made me the joke, the throwaway. But this time, with Mom gone and her will finally being read, I had prayed there'd be something, just a piece of dignity left for me. Dad leaned back in his chair, smirking, while my sister Courtney twirled her diamond bracelet like it was already a crown. The lawyer shuffled papers and began, "To my husband, Daniel, I leave the family savings." Dad's lips curled into a grin so wide I could see the molar he always flashed when mocking me. "To my daughter, Courtney, I leave the house, the land, and the family heirlooms." My sister gasped dramatically, like she hadn't already been whispering to Dad about how she'd decorate her room weeks ago. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. "And to my son," he paused, adjusting his glasses. "She leaves?" His eyes faltered, as if even he didn't believe what was written. "The items stored in the garbage bins out back." The room erupted in laughter, but not the shocked kind, the knowing kind. Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Perfect. Trash for trash. Looks like she knew you well." Courtney squealed, jingling the new house keys the lawyer had just handed her. "Guess you'll be out digging tonight. Careful not to smell worse than usual." Heat burned my face. I wanted to shout, but the words lodged in my throat. Everyone's eyes were on me, waiting for me to snap, waiting for me to be the fool again. I stood slowly, my legs trembling, and walked out without saying a word. My father's voice chased me down the hallway. "Don't forget to check the bin behind the garage. Maybe there's a half-eaten burger left for you." Outside, the air was sharp with the smell of asphalt and oil. I walked to the back of the property where the bins leaned crookedly against the fence. For a moment, I just stared. Was this really all they thought I was worth? My mother, the one person I had thought might see me, had written this into her will. My fists curled so hard my nails dug into my palms, and yet something inside me whispered, "Look." I lifted the first lid. Old newspapers, torn curtains, broken lamps. I almost laughed bitterly. Then, buried deep in a black bag, I found something odd. A carved wooden box, its hinges rusted but intact. My heart pounded as I brushed off the dust and opened it. Inside were letters, my mother's handwriting. "For my son, if you're reading this, they will have already laughed at you. But know this, I saw everything. I knew what they were, what they did. You were never trash." Tears blurred my vision. The box was heavy, too heavy for just letters. I reached beneath the stack and pulled out envelopes. Dozens, banknotes, certificates, deeds I didn't understand. My breath hitched. The garbage they mocked me with wasn't garbage at all. It was everything hidden from them. That night, I carried the box back to my apartment with shaking arms. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't speak to anyone. I sat there in the dim light, reading every word my mother had left for me. She knew Dad would twist the will. She knew Courtney would gloat, so she had disguised my inheritance as trash, because only I would look. And in that silence, the first seed of revenge began to bloom. Not loud, not in front of others. Something colder, deeper. They thought they had handed me garbage. They had handed me the match. I sat at my kitchen table with the wooden box in front of me, the letters spread out like pieces of a puzzle. Each envelope carried my mother's looping handwriting, every line dripping with a mixture of guilt and warning. She had known. She had always known. One note stopped me cold. "Daniel will sell the house. He already made plans before my passing. He will never let you have it. But I hid what matters in the one place he will never look, the trash he despises. Use it wisely and never tell them what you found." Her words lit a fire in me. I wasn't just holding scraps. I was holding power. Property deeds, stock certificates, bonds. Things I barely understood, but I knew enough. My mother had left me a fortune disguised as filth. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed relentlessly. Courtney, Dad. Their messages piled in. Hope you're having fun digging, loser. Don't come around to the house. Keys are for family only. Remember to bow when you see your sister. She's the one with a future, not you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Let them laugh. Every word they sent was fuel. Every insult was another brick in the wall I was building between me and them. The next few weeks, I lived in silence. I worked my shifts, came home, and studied every paper in that box like scripture. I visited banks, asked quiet questions, learned who my mother's lawyer really was, not the one they all sat with, but the private contact she had slipped into one of her letters. He explained what I didn't understand, and his eyes widened when I showed him the documents. Your mother was smarter than any of them realized, he whispered. She split everything in two, the showy will for them and the real one for you. The power of that truth sat heavy in my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one begging. I wasn't the one scraping. I was holding something they couldn't even imagine existed. But instead of flaunting it, I stayed quiet. I kept eating my simple meals, kept wearing my old clothes, kept my same rundown car. And as I did, I watched my family spiral. Courtney moved into the house. She threw parties every weekend, her new keys dangling like jewelry in every photo. Dad boasted around town, bragging about how his real child was carrying the family's honor. I heard whispers at work, saw the pity in neighbors' eyes. They thought I had been thrown out like garbage. They didn't know that every time Courtney paid for champagne, she was spending my mother's hidden money. Every time Dad sat on the porch and laughed at me walking by, he was sitting on land that wasn't even his anymore. I had the deeds. The ownership was mine. One night, as rain hammered against my window, I caught myself whispering out loud, "Let them think it's theirs. Let them choke on it first." The true revenge wasn't going to be a single explosion. It was going to be a slow burn. They were going to live high, mock me to my face, treat me like dirt, while every wall around them was already mine, every brick already under my control. And when the time was right, when they finally needed me most, they would find out the truth in the cruelest way possible. Still, the bitterness boiled. Seeing Courtney parade through town with her perfect hair and fake smiles while she held parties in the home that was technically mine made my skin crawl. Seeing Dad sneer at me in front of neighbors, "Look, the stray still roams around," made my jaw ache from clenching it. But I forced myself to stay silent. My mother's words were etched in my mind. Use it wisely. So I started preparing, quietly, methodically. I moved money, shifted papers, strengthened my control legally so there would be no loophole, no trick they could pull later. And as I did, I began building something else. Distance. Emotional, physical, spiritual distance. Because when the final blow landed, I wanted them to realize it wasn't just about wealth. It was about absence, about erasure. I wanted them to feel the hollowness of celebrating in a house that wasn't really theirs, to taste the bitterness of mocking someone who had already slipped out of their grasp. The last letter in the box ended with a single line. One day, they will come crawling to you. That is when you will know what to do. And as I folded it back into the envelope, I promised her, I'll make them crawl, and when they do, they'll find nothing left. Winter came heavy that year. The roof of the house I technically owned sagged under snow, but Courtney didn't care. She had strung glittering lights across it for yet another party. I watched from a distance, unseen, leaning against my car parked down the road. Music pulsed through the cold air, their laughter spilling into the night. My father's voice rose above the rest, bragging once again. My daughter has everything because she deserves it. The other one? She couldn't even afford a bus ticket. I smiled. If only he knew. Because while they raised their glasses in that house, letters were already on their way. Property transfers, utility notices, tax assessments, all with my name. They had no clue that every sip of their wine, every bill they ignored was already tangled in the net I had woven. The first crack showed in early spring. Courtney called me, her voice shrill through the phone. The electric company says the bill's under your name. Fix it." I leaned back in my chair, letting her words sit. "Why would I fix something in my name, Courtney? You've got the keys, you're the queen. Handle it." I hung up before she could reply. Weeks later, Dad stormed into my work. His face was red, his boots tracking mud across the lobby floor. "You think you're clever? Changing papers behind our backs?" His voice thundered, but there was fear in his eyes. "You'll give your sister what she deserves." I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something had shifted. He wasn't angry because I had nothing. He was angry because I had everything. For the first time in my life, I didn't flinch. "Deserves?" I said softly. "She's been living off my shadow her whole life. Maybe it's time she finds out what garbage tastes like." He raised his fist the way he had 1,000 times before, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the quiet way I spoke. Maybe it was the realization that I wasn't begging anymore. He dropped his hand and stormed out, leaving behind only the smell of his sweat and rage. By summer, the collapse began in earnest. Courtney tried to sell the house to cover her debts, only to discover the deed was untouchable without my signature. Dad tried to use the land as collateral for a loan, only to be laughed out of the bank. Their whispers in town changed from triumph to confusion, then to panic. That was when I chose to disappear. I withdrew quietly from every place they knew me, closed accounts, packed bags, shifted everything of value into forms they couldn't trace. I sold the land, the stocks, every asset hidden in my mother's box. And I did it fast, silent, absolute. Then I cut ties. No forwarding address, no phone number, no trace. The day the movers came to clear out the house, Courtney screamed until her throat went raw. Dad pounded his fists against the porch railing, his face purple with fury. "You can't do this. This is our legacy." I stood across the street, unseen, leaning against my car one last time. The for sale sign already planted in the yard felt like a gravestone. I didn't wave. I didn't shout. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a confrontation. I simply turned the key in the ignition and drove away. Days later, I heard through neighbors. They had been forced into a rental, a shabby little place far from the center of town. Their friends stopped visiting. Their whispers dried up. Courtney's parties ended. Dad's bragging turned into silence. And that was my revenge. Not a public scene, not some staged humiliation. It was absence. It was emptiness. I gave them nothing, not even the dignity of a goodbye. Sometimes, late at night, I pull out the last letter. My mother wrote and read the final line again. "One day, they will come crawling to you. That is when you will know what to do." And she was right. Weeks later, they showed up at my old door, hollow-eyed, begging. "We need help, please." But the locks were changed. The curtains were drawn. The house was empty. They had laughed when I dug through garbage bags. But in the end, they were the ones left scavenging, tearing through scraps of their own ruined pride. I had vanished with everything. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video?